And thanks everyone for joining. I have a feeling people are going to keep joining as we get past the hour, but I'll kick it off and just it's great to see you all. How this all came about and sort of the rules of engagement for today are, there are no rules. Christy and I were chatting, this is probably like a few months ago. And as we were chatting, we're like, it's never been this good to be a woman in tech. And as we were chatting, we're like, this is such a great conversation. Let's open this up and let's have it, with others. And then, Jocelyn is someone who I always love talking about this with. And I think, a common thread between the three of us is we just have grabbed our careers, by the bulls or the reins or whatever, and just gone for it. And so as Christy and Jocelyn introduced themselves, one of the things that we said, as we kick it off, really open style today. If there's things you want to, questions you want to ask in the chat, feel free. There's a few topics we definitely want to chat about, but, Christy and Jocelyn, I'd love if you could introduce yourself and say, one of the things that, you've really done to drive your career, like a big move that you've done to get to where you are today.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
Yeah. Awesome.
Sure. It's 901.
Hang on, I'm just gonna.
I think somebody needs.
Yeah. So we don't all get somebody's phone number.
Jocelyn, I was like, your voice, like that shifted.
I know. I looked at Jocelyn and Christy, and I'm like, their mouths aren't moving, so I don't know who that is.
I can go next still if you like.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah. So my name is Jocelyn Brown. I'm coming to you from Toronto. I've spent my whole software career mostly in customer success roles or, sort of adjacent roles. In my last organization, I started in customer success, but then also took over the sales organization, which is probably one of those leaps in there. But before I did software, I worked in ad sales essentially. And probably the biggest leap I took was getting into software. I had kind of burnt out on the job I was in and left it, which in itself was sort of a move where I knew I couldn't. And I went to an event and saw some people working at Eloqua talk about what they were doing. And I was like, man, those people love their job, and what they're describing in a sort of case study sounds super interesting. So I went home that night and I applied to virtually every job on the site because I didn't know what any of them were.
Oh my God, I never knew that.
Oh yeah, it was tech.
I had such a similar conversation, but I did mine one at a time.
Yeah.
And kept getting rejected.
Yeah, and at the time they were so desperate for support people that Aaron Rothschild called me right back and in 5 or 10 minutes was like, oh, you're overqualified for what I need, but you should come talk to my boss, Paul. And that's sort of how that happened. But I sort of went to the site and read the descriptions, like, I've got to be qualified for one of these. So I just applied to a bunch of them under the, I'm interested in learning and I know a little bit about ad tech because I'd started selling internet advertising at a company called DoubleClick. So I had enough language that I could have maybe faked my way through it a bit. And I just saw people that were passionate about something. I was like, I can work with those people. I can get it into that thing. So really is the assumption that my skills could transfer to something and just trying and reaching out and sort of the rest is history from there. That was the start of my software career, which that'll be my career. I can't see myself moving out of software and probably never out of customer facing roles either.
Jocelyn, I didn't know this, but you and I have more overlap in our career trajectories than I initially thought. I thought we had enough with the software part. So my career started in online advertising, working for publishing companies where I was using DoubleClick also to serve ads on these things. And I started off as like a campaign manager where I was managing large customers, right? Making sure all their ads were being delivered effectively, doing the analysis on that, reporting back to them on their effectiveness, and then working with them to optimize that. So very interesting overlap. So let me, I'll kind of do my little story there. So my name is Christy Faltruso. I'm currently the Chief Customer Officer, newly appointed, very, very newly appointed Chief Customer Officer at Client Success, which is a customer success management solution. But I had a very similar journey. So I have two acts to my professional career. Act one was in online advertising and digital marketing, where I spent the first 10 years of my professional career really with a heavy emphasis on digital marketing and online acquisition, primarily around search engine optimization. And during that point in my career, I had used a technology called BrightEdge, which was a search engine optimization software, which allowed me to take all of my optimization efforts, put them into technology, and make sure I was optimizing all of the content for our websites to ultimately drive more traffic to either generate revenue or ad sales, things of that like. During that time, I used BrightEdge two times, two different companies, and developed a great relationship with the CEO and their CTO, who were both co-founders. And jokingly said to them, because they were based in Silicon Valley, I was in New York, and said, you guys need to open an office in New York. How do you have no presence out here? This is like the online advertising and like agency capital of the world. Like, we're not, like, your customers aren't in the Bay Area, they're here. And I said, open an office in New York and hire me. And so they did, and I did. I was their third hire in New York in a customer success role and capacity, where I was like, I have no idea what I'm doing. And we'll talk about that. I was like, I don't even know how to spell SaaS. I didn't have these fancy degrees. I didn't know anything about tech, didn't know what customer success was, but have spent the past decade in act two of my career, really learning everything that I can personally and professionally about customer success and what it means to be a customer-centric organization, where I've either built, scaled, or transformed post-initial sales teams to help organizations generate more revenue, profitability, and ultimately customer success through their customer base. So that's been my career, and a ton of fun. I always feel like I'm always out of place and always outnumbered and undereducated on whatever it is we're talking about in the room, but it's been fun. And so I'm super excited about today's conversation.
Those are great backgrounds. I am terrible at introducing myself. I always forget. I go right to the guest. So I'll jump in on that. So I'm a managing director at Winning by Design. We help recurring revenue businesses with their go-to-market model, from marketing, sales to customer success. But my career has been in customer success. Also, since my Eloqua days, I also started in advertising, but mine was above the line, so more traditional advertising. And then I went into consulting, which was more below the line, and I was learning about, digital and direct marketing, and that's where I found out about Eloqua. And when I was moving back from New York, where I was living, to Toronto, Eloqua was like the hottest company. Someone I worked with, and actually this is how one of the first ways I got a start. One of the partners, I was working at a consulting firm and a partner with an investment bank. And he goes, if you're moving to Toronto, you have to work at Eloqua. It's the best company I've seen. You got to work there. And he introduced me to the CEO. I don't even know why he liked me so much. I barely worked with him, but he just, there are people in this world who want to help you. And we're going to touch on that shortly. And then the more I got to know about Eloqua and the culture, I was so excited to join the company. I knew nothing about tech. I was so not technical enough. I still don't even know if I know how to build anything in Eloqua after working there, But I think the theme to my career is I always took jobs that scared the shit out of me. I'm like, if I don't know how to do it, I want to take this on. I think being in this state of, I don't know what I'm doing, potentially is my comfort zone. And then when I get really comfortable, I get a little bored. And so, going to join something else. Now, that's being said, it's still scary. And I remember when I got hired for my first VP of customer success job, I was young and I'm like, I don't know if I know how to do this job. And I remember calling my mother-in-law, actually, who had introduced me to the CEO of that company. I go, they just hired me as a VP. And I'm really nervous. And she goes, don't worry, I'll help you. She didn't actually help me at all after that, but just having someone, a powerhouse, other women just say, don't worry, if you get in trouble, I'll help you, was really confident boosting. So, and yeah, tech is amazing. So Christy, when we were chatting and Joss, we've had a bunch of chats and I worked, and what's funny, Jocelyn usually mentioned it, but I interviewed Jocelyn at Eloqua, which was where we first met, which was really fun. So I often just call you Joss, and I'm sorry if that's
no, it's good.
One of the things we chatted about was helping each other and allyship in this finding a group of, a network that works for you. Christy, when we were chatting, we're like, what's up with like this, like victim mentality? Like it's so over that now. We are in this opportunistic, phase of being a woman in tech, and this is what it's all about. Joss, you had some really great, thoughts around this when we were chatting. I'd love you to take the conversation, share
Sure.
some insights. And
I think we'd started on a bit of you guys were expressing some frustration with some of the networking that's sort of targeted at women, and the sort of feeling there of being more about complaining about the dearth of opportunity or the barriers or otherwise, and less sort of focused on moving out of that. And I think that does exist. I think using that we're women in tech as a gathering point, it just isn't enough, right? That's sort of a characteristic that doesn't necessarily draw people together in a productive way. But I have had many really positive experiences in networking groups or in huddles of women in tech, where actually the focus was not so much why are we in this group, but how can we help each other? And one was a large CMO network where the focus really was how can we help everybody get on board. So there were some people further on in their career that were actively then saying, here's how you get on boards, here's how we improve that representation on boards. And now's the time. At the time, sort of legislation in California was changing around requirements for board diversity. There was stuff going on. And this group, while we were exclusive to women, and we talked a lot about whether we should stay that way and open up to men or not, but there was something to we're here to actually help each other. And half of the content was functional, was about marketing stuff, but half of it really was about how can we help each other and how do we move forward? And that was a lot of what I valued in that. And I've been in a couple other ones, some that were put together by vendors. That's fine. I'll meet some people if you'll introduce me. And I think it's really, once you get there, evaluating whether that's a productive and positive environment that's less about sort of the victimship or the things that we're missing, and more about we're all here. There's value in what I can provide for each person in the room, and likewise I can get value from all of them. And what do we do? How do we harness this so that we can all step up and make that really more about what is the thing that we can do to bring everybody along? How can I share an experience that will help somebody else? How can I make a connection that will help someone else, and spend no time talking about the negative aspect of it, or what's the kind of barrier that's been put in our way, and more about the opportunity that's in front of us. And certainly in tech right now, and so I would say in the last 4 or 5 years, that focus on diversity in leadership positions, people actually tracking whether they have representation on their board, on their leadership team of women in all those positions, opens up a huge opportunity. It's not a negative thing that you might be considered because you're a woman. It's an opportunity to take advantage of. And what's important is that once you get there, that you are delivering value, that it is a positive contribution that you're making, and not worry so much about how it happened, but what you can do once you get there. So I think we were sort of just looking at how can we make sure that we're always taking the perspective that we're not together because we're somehow barred from something else. We're together because our power can kind of bring us forward, and we have the opportunity to kind of lift everybody up in the same breath.
I think what's interesting, and Jocelyn, I loved how you framed that. And you've also had the privilege of being part of groups that kind of originated around that mindset, which is amazing. I feel like I've participated in some groups where maybe the victim mindset is what brought us together. But what you just talked about is possible for any group or kind of huddle or gathering of women, right? Like we can just change the mindset and the objective of why we are here together. So even if you're part of a group where it feels like there's a little bit of that, oh, woe is us, right? Conversation taking place, change it, right? Flip it on its head and talk about, instead of what are the barriers to entry, how do we capitalize on the opportunity? How does every single one of us who's in this room help and elevate and open doors for one another? And you don't need to be a leader. You don't need to be somebody at the top of their career to open a door or to help someone along on their journey. And I think that that's something else that we all have to recognize, is that every single person in their role, in their seat, wherever they are, has the opportunity to be an ally and help someone else along in their career, whether it's facilitating introductions, whether it is, helping facilitate job recommendations, or just connecting people, right? There's tons of ways that we can do that. I think we all need to be mindful about how do we leverage those opportunities together when we are together to really help us all up-level the group.
I will say what's funny is that I've found the same experience sometimes in groups of CS people, where it's sort of woe is us because sales gets all the money and the attention, engineering doesn't.
Well, I was going to say CS almost has a little woe is us, which
like CS has got a little this woe is us too. And I'm like, why? We own we're the closest to the customer, and that's who pays the bills. We have all the power, or we should have all the power, or we should stand on our own 2 feet and say, I know exactly what's happening at the front lines. You may have imagined how this is going to use or what this experience would be, but I actually know. So I've walked out of, and we talked about sort of walking out of groups that just didn't serve us. I've walked out of rooms with CS groups where I've been like, I ain't going back to that group, because I don't care. Like, talk about what it is that you have that you can bring and that you can share. And if that's not the place where that's happening, leave, because it's not helping. And the woe is us from CS, just, you're the closest to the customer. You have all the power.
You have a lot of the power. And I think it's a misunderstood. I think, Jocelyn, you come to CS from a really great background, in the sense that you always own revenue.
Always. Yeah.
Yeah.
That would be the advice that I would, we've talked about the advice you could get. I think if you sit, and this is true of marketing too, but if you sit certainly in CS, sign up for a number, whether you literally own it or not, or whether you're signing up for that accountability in your comp or in whatever you're doing. Owning a number is such an important thing. And I also like it from the mentality of that's what we're here to do, is facilitate the growth of this company and the opportunity to invest back into customers and the tool and otherwise. And the best way to show that you're serious about that mission is to own a number. If you're in CS and you can, own a number, always.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I've walked away from roles where I said, as a CS leader, okay, I need to own, how much of the revenue number do I get to own or be responsible for? And they're like, I remember one company was like, oh no, that's not your role. And I go, well, then this isn't for me.
No,
because you can't, as close as you are to the customer, unless you have, direct ties to revenue where your CFO, your CRO, your CEO can see, then it's hard for them to take you seriously. They're always going to listen to the people who are closest to the number, even though you are, being so customer, facing and really driving so many of those relationships.
Well, and again, it's a good time in CS because that's becoming the trend, right? It's much more common for CS to own a number now. And I think, it doesn't have to be that you're the only one accountable for it.
And I think companies are really turning around to this concept that, CS really isn't this cost center, right? Mm-hmm. It's not about, being, revenue neutral or making back your money. It's about growing your profitability of your organization.
Totally. Yeah. So it's a good time.
Christy, do you own a number right now?
I do. So we own everything. I always say I own the post initial sales organization, because we are selling, right? We're always selling. So what my new logo sales team does is the first sell, but my team, right? The renewal, the growth, upsell, expansion, we continue to sell. So I like to differentiate it by saying they're not the sales team. They are the initial sales team. My team is also responsible for all of that revenue. So we own everything.
Yeah, that's an amazing. It's funny because we think of, we have this concept called the bow tie funnel, right? And we're constantly thinking about the terminology post initial sale, because we don't want to be we don't want to be post sales, right? So, we thought about it as customer acquisition on that, on the marketing and sales side, and then customer growth on the right-hand side, to really get away from this concept of, we do this and then we do this thing after.
Yeah.
Well, I'll say that I've chosen to work with a product-led growth company. So I work at a company, I lead success in sales, although it's a small company. So lead is a loose term.
I do 1,000 other things too.
Yeah. In product-led, what really appealed to me about it, one, it's sort of a new puzzle for me. But the people are customers almost like right away, as soon as they download a trial, and even maybe a little bit before that. So there's less of a distinction there. And it's more about matching the right resource to the moment they're at, or the help that they need, or the place that they are. And that you kind of consider everybody a customer, whether they're paying or not, right from the outset, because they're having an experience with your product that's influencing your opportunity to serve them in the long term. So that I like that sort of mentality, and it gets to your bow tie much quicker. The one side of the bow tie is tiny.
There's a whole bunch of people who are new to CS I'm seeing in the chat. So, if you were to throw out an ad lib question here, if you were to give anyone any advice for their starting off in their career in CS, what would you give them? And I'll go first to give you time to think. My one piece of advice is to be curious. So, in part of what I do, I listen to a lot of calls, and I'll notice that whether you're in sales or CS, like you talk to a customer, you ask them a question, they answer you, and response is often, cool. And then you ask your next question, or okay, and you go on. And then you get off the call and it's like, wait, why did they ask that question? What does that mean? And so when you're talking to customers, be curious and ask the questions you would ask in a conversation with your best friend, right? Oh, you said that. Why'd you say that? What's going on there? To really get curious with your customers and dig in and learn a lot more about them, and some real gems will happen out of that.
Well, I would have jumped on intellectual curiosity. It's always my CSM superpower, right? For anyone in customer success, intellectual curiosity will do it every time. Being able to ask the right questions at the right time, being very thoughtful and inquisitive will always unleash more information, which will help you be better at your jobs. But since you already said that, Julia, I will come up with another one. I will say the next piece of advice I would give you is to remember that you're not defined by your failures. And that's only because that was something that I felt I struggled with initially. I would probably say I'm a self-proclaimed perfectionist. I want everything to be perfect. I feel like, I always strove for that in school as a student. And then in my career, right, I always wanted to be the best, the top performing. And in customer success, churn will happen, right? Yeah. Customers will leave for a multitude of reasons, and for many that are way outside of your control, right? M&A is my favorite example of that. Our ICP, our ideal customer profile at Client Success, are these smaller mid-sized companies, which are prime for acquisition. And usually if they're being acquired, there's very little I can do to influence it if the acquiring company already has a tech stack that is duplicative to the services we provide. And that said, I'm usually going to be displaced. That doesn't mean that my team didn't do their job, they didn't do it well, that our product failed, right? But it's hard when you own that customer, you own that number, to not take it personal. So for me, learning how to compartmentalize and to not define myself and the value in my role by those moments, that took me a long time to develop that. And it's something I still struggle with, right? I am not defined by my most recent failure or my most recent success. And so just learning that, I think, early, and then just reminding yourself of that, you're better than what just happened.
Yeah, that is a very good point, because there's a lot of things you can't control, and customer success is a team sport. The odds that it was you alone that caused some sort of attrition or failure are very small. Being curious about why, and certainly postmortems and all that stuff are important, but taking blame is never going to help. I think for me, curiosity has always been sort of when you get asked what your superpower is, that's definitely up there. And I really do think when I interview for candidates, curiosity is always what I'm looking for, because it's the only way we're going to get patterns, how customers use your tool, what's going on, what's changing is only going to come from the field, and the field's got to dig and ask those questions ongoing. What I would say, kind of in that vein, that curiosity has to be turned internally as well. So the more knowledgeable you are about the rest of the company. And what I would say is assume positive intent always. Mm-hmm. So when the development team launches something that seems like it makes no sense and nobody asked for it, assume that they did it with some positive intent and get curious about why that's there. When a customer is angry about something or coming to you with a problem, again, assume that they're trying to do something positive. they're trying to resolve something, and whatever is coming at you is probably not, it's not about you, but it's also probably not the full story. So what you're trying to get at is like, what is the thing that you're trying to do that's actually not this negative energy or this seemingly destructive thing that's going on. Assume that people either were trying to do the right thing or doing their best or doing it based on a set of information. Maybe that the information was skewed, but they did try and do the right thing, and it just turned out wrong. And I think if you start from the place that it's likely that they were trying to do the right thing, it just changes the tenor of the conversation. It's not a battle. It's about a sort of discovery around what were they actually trying to do. And maybe it just didn't turn out right. Because I think that's we're often in the front lines kind of having to bring down the temperature, and we're often caught in the middle. So the more you understand about the intent of your product organization or your finance organization or whoever's making a decision that you're having to carry the burden of, that there was a good reason behind it. And maybe you can get behind that reason, even if you can't get behind the implementation of it. Maybe you guys can co-create a better way to roll it out, but make sure you understand the initial purpose. And then if there was malice in the initial intent, maybe not the best place for you to be, but start from the perspectives that people were trying to do the right thing or trying to do something productive.
Yeah, I mean, and mistakes happen.
Oh yeah.
Right. Yeah. Maybe, and one thing I learned early on, I was really frustrated with my product team, at this one company I was at, and, sometimes I would be described as a bull in a china shop. And, I was like, but they messed up and they did this and that, my customers are yelling at me and da-da-da. And I remember the CEO goes, what role could you play in this? Like, what could you have done? And I'm like, I was so like shocked and like a little bit offended when he said that. I'm like, well, what do you mean? And then I took a step back and I go, you know what? Okay, there were some things I could have done. And starting off a conversation, even with that, hey, I realize that I haven't been as communicative, with you about some things that our clients have been asking for.
Yeah.
In that vein, here are some things that they've talked about. And here's the impact that this latest release has had on this group of customers. Can we work together to do that? And so much better than me like just storming over there being like, what the heck, guys?
Do you remember when our entire IP range got blocked?
Oh, yeah.
So we were a marketing automation tool. So email being the primary thing that we delivered. And one day our entire IP range got blocked. And so literally no customers' email were going anywhere, which is complete panic.
I think I IP blocked that from my memory.
Yeah. I remember I was in the Boston airport. And so very quickly we owned up to it. Very quickly we communicated with the whole customer base and, own it, communicate about it often and work with them. And I think I got 3 calls from customers asking me if I was okay. Right. So sometimes, even though, again, we're getting maybe the pain coming from our customers, they're people, they've made mistakes too. Right. So they may also be, you'll find that if you've built that relationship and usually a CSM has that opportunity to do so, that there is a very human and personal element there, and the best relationships are forged in fire. Right. So the people that you go through kind of possibly the hardest stuff with can be the strongest relationships you have in the other time. So it's not always an adversarial thing. Sometimes it's owning up to the mistake, hoping that they'll come along with you and working your way through the other side. And maybe you part ways on it, but you part ways well. And who knows, they're coming back. Tech's a small world. Canadian tech's an even smaller world. You will run into them again.
Hey, Julie, I have to say, I'm super intrigued by Rosemary's question here. And I thought that we can noodle on that for a few minutes. I don't know where you
Totally. And if we can tie into a couple of, so I'm going to throw back at you, but also a bunch of people have mentioned taking a step back in their careers to take a step forward. And I think it all kind of ties in together. So, okay, Christy, over to you.
Okay. All right. Well, I wasn't prepared to answer it off the bat, but let me take a shot.
It sounded like you.
I'm going to reread Rosemary's question, so I'm prepared to answer it effectively. So we often hear men ask for roles before they're actually ready, but women wait too long and always find things that they could still improve. As you progress in leadership roles, how do you navigate knowing when to go for or ask for the next promotion versus continuing to gain experience in your current role? I'll give you my experience. For me, I never rushed it, but I never waited till I was 100%, because guess what? I'll never be 100% ready to take on any role. You know, somebody asked me the other day, so now that you've stepped into the CCO role, like, what are you doing, or how's your role evolved? And I'm like, it's not, I'm doing what I have to do. Like, this is the business, like, it's great, but here's where we are at this stage. And I don't even really know what I need to do next at the next level, because our business has this need today. But so for me, my career progression, I definitely have been assertive about it. I will tell you that. I've been very clear about making it known to my leadership team and folks around me that that was something I was interested in, right? Like, so if I'm sitting, my very first role in customer success was a senior CSM role. I made sure that our VP knew often that I was very interested in that next role, which would be a director people leadership role. And I made sure that and I forced him to communicate with me all the time. What do I need to do to earn the right to sit in that seat? What do you need to see from me? How am I going to help you visualize me as an effective person or candidate for that opportunity? And we just had that conversation all the time. And when the opportunity did present itself, did I check all of the boxes? No, but I did bring a lot of strength to that, right? And so there was a lot of value in me stepping into the role. So I've never been 100%. I've always taken chances. I've always tried to advance my career when I thought it felt right. But I did also invest the time, right? I put in the work and I put in the time, because I did want to make sure that I knew enough to be successful. But you don't need to know everything to be successful, right? I will tell you, as a people leader, I hire really brilliant people who bridge all of my gaps. People, I will tell you, my best thing is I find people that are really good at math, because math is not my thing. I don't like, as much as I love owning revenue, I'm like not going to sit here and build like formulas and do all that stuff. I'm not a math person. So finding people who bridge all of those gaps for me, right? And the things that I don't like to do or not really strong at, has helped me also elevate my career. And then I take them along with me, right? People that have been successful and helping me be more successful, kind of come along for that journey, and I've opened doors for them as a result of it. So I've never waited till I was ready. I don't think there is such thing as ready, but I do also agree that I don't see it as often where women are as assertive about their careers. So we need to change that.
Yeah, it's not about demanding the role. It's about, exactly as you said, Christy, like letting people know. It's kind of a gift to your manager. So the tool I support now, we talk about one-on-ones a lot. We talk about career development and things like that, because we support meetings, and one-on-one being a very important meeting within everybody's workday. And it's kind of a gift to your manager to let them know where you want to go. Not to say this is the job I want next week, but to say I'm interested here, because they're in a lot of rooms that you're not, and it gives them the opportunity to put you forward when that opportunity arises, whether it's a cross-functional thing or otherwise. They're also planning a year, 2 year, 3 year or more down the line of what the organization should look like. And so again, if they understand where you want to go and you've had these conversations about building towards that, they can start, placing you in those future org charts. And they're not going to talk to you necessarily about that, because, it depends on the growth of the company and money available and stuff like that. But it is, you're doing them a favor of letting them know where it is that you're planning to go and where you want to go, because that helps them in their planning. So it's not overly assertive. It's not necessarily, don't look at it as something where you're being too aggressive or otherwise, which is, I think, one of the barriers we sometimes put in front of ourselves, and is kind of bred in the social fabric of, a woman being demanding is bossy or a negative thing. But view it as like you're helping them in some ways, a good manager, at least you're helping them see how they can actually grow this organization. But yeah, I don't wait, and ask what you need to do for sure. Christy's made a really solid point there, is that if you are communicating, it shows that you're trying and you're ready to learn, and they're going to find opportunities for you. What's next? I think we lost Julie. I don't know what happened. She does have
all of a sudden all the little boxes did, and then she went away.
She does have a little one homesick. I know that.
Okay. All right. So she was steering the ship. I think we can step in though, right?
Well, somebody asked in here, I think Laura asked, what do you look for when going to promote someone on your team to a more senior CS role? So Christy, what are you actually looking for in the people working for you when you're promoting?
So this is an interesting one, right? Because I mean, obviously for them to be a high performer who's going to be even entertained for a promotion, whether that be an individual, a more senior individual or contributor or a leadership role, for me, I look for consistency. Nobody's gonna be perfect, right? And you're gonna have moments where you're great and moments where maybe you're not feeling so great about the work that you're doing. But for me, it's about consistency. Is that person consistent in performing at the level that I would expect them to in order to be considered for this role? So that's a big one for me. People are going to have, especially if you're owning revenue, right? You're going to have killer quarters. You're going to have quarters that are maybe not so great. And like I said, I don't ever define somebody by those moments in time. Those are anomalies, hopefully. So I look for consistency. Like, does this person show up, do the work that's expected of them? Do they step into opportunities? Do they raise their hand? Are they ambitious? Are they gritty? Are they resourceful? All of those things, but those are demonstrated through their ability to be consistent in demonstrating those.
Yeah, I'll just add that as you're moving up in CS, your ability to collaborate outside of the CS department becomes more and more and more important. By the time you're at the sort of CCO level, most of what you're doing is collaborating with those outside to remove barriers for your team, to grow the business in a particular way, things like that. So certainly when people have expressed their desire to move into senior leadership roles, I've often looked for opportunities for them to run cross collaboration projects, or to be a liaison to product or support or whatever the sort of gap that we might have is, because your ability to communicate the needs and advocate, your ability to understand the other side of the equation. So your ability to understand why the CS team's priorities aren't being met, and to work and collaborate with peers outside of that team become really critical. Because some people are great at managing clients, and that you want to promote them on an IC role if that's what they're wanting to do, because you need senior tenured people in some of those high profile accounts and roles. And for some people, that's exactly where they should be. And I had somebody on my team that's what they wanted to do. That really was. And that's kind of a gift if somebody's really clear about that's what they want to do. As you move up, it's less about necessarily your client management skills. Those still are important and critical, but it has a lot to do with your critical thinking, with your communication, and with your ability to collaborate. So I'd be looking for opportunities to showcase some of those skills, because your client management alone isn't enough to sort of move up in the seniority in CS.
And we should talk about that too for a moment, right? Like, you could have a very successful trajectory in an individual contributor role. I have 4 women on my team right now who all report to me in some either senior CSM or CSM capacity, and 3 of the 4 of them have no desire to be people leaders.
Yeah.
All 4 of them would be amazing, but 3 of them have no interest. They want to figure out, how do I grow to the highest level in my professional career as an individual contributor? I love the work that I do. Maybe it becomes more of a cross-functional liaison where they aren't managing people, but they're doing bigger, different work. So don't think that the only way up is into people management path, because that's not the case. And I will say, people leadership is the hardest thing I do every
it's a totally different job.
Yeah,
it's not a promotion, it's
its own job.
It's a total career change. So that's the other thing. Yeah, I like to sometimes look at sort of the more on the technical or developer world. They have many more paths or common paths of ICs being very senior. So you look at architects and things like that, they can be very senior people within a development with no, and VP level and greater, with no direct reports. We probably don't have as many of those paths in CS yet, but that's just a maturity of the function more than anything.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think as the organizations even expand, right? So even to this like owning all of revenue scope of role, you're going to see different roles and specialties pop up. And all, honestly, what I always tell my team is, don't limit yourself by titles that exist today. Go find gaps and areas where you're going to drive real business impact that's a need for us, and go create your role. I tell my team every day, I'm like, if there is something that we are not doing well, that we need to be doing better, and there is real scope around that, go design it and let me know what it looks like. And it might not be a full-time role, but I could definitely, if it's an area of interest, consider making it maybe like a hybrid or something, but get creative. Don't limit yourselves by what's available or what you see in front of you today.
Yeah. And there's lots of parts of the organization that would benefit greatly by having somebody who's done a customer facing or CSM role. You think of product marketing, you can think there's a bunch of marketing roles, be it community, customer marketing, product marketing, where having that benefit of customer experience would be massive. Product management. The best product managers are the ones that are in front of customers that are dedicated to that. So if you're looking also just how can I use the skills or what I learned as a CS professional in other parts of the organization, even just to test it out or just to see if that's the path you want to go. I've had CSMs become sales reps. I've had CSMs become solution consultants, great solution consultants, actually, because they have so many customer stories that they become amazing members of the sales team. Product marketing, certainly customer marketing and other parts like that.
QA was a really good one that I saw.
QA, yep, because they feel the real pain. Yeah, there's more opportunities, with having that in-depth knowledge and understanding of how the customer works and how that evolves that are available to you guys.
I'd like to jump back, and sorry that I bailed for a few minutes. It's weird. I actually had a dream last night that I wasn't part of this event for like 45 minutes. I kept trying to get back online and it wasn't working. And it seems like I was telling Joss, I restarted my computer before this and then decided to do a software update. And I was like, okay, this is not the best time. And then this happens, like, whoa, that's so interesting. But just on the, joining, taking jobs that you don't necessarily feel ready for. And I think I'm someone who's always taken a job that I'm not ready for, don't necessarily have the skill set. I'm a big on the job learner. That's how it's how I jive. But something I've learned both with myself and then others, and I do a lot of mentorship with people who are, looking for their next career path. And some of the common things that I always root back to is, what is it that you're looking to get out of this job? Because you don't want to be chasing a title. Mm-hmm. That when you chase a title and you get that title, it feels very empty. And so going back to what's important to you, I remember this one woman who I worked with at Influitive. She was a BDR and she had 20 years of experience, maybe more. She was unbelievably talented. She could do anything she wanted. She could be a people leader, she could be a VP, she could be a sales rep, whatever she wanted. She wanted to be an enterprise BDR, work 20 hours a week with a few, partner with a sales rep. And just because that was the life she wanted, decent, income, flexibility. She was a mom of two. She loved to, take her kids to biking competitions. So she's like, this is the job I want. I don't want to climb the ladder. I don't want to be promoted. I want to do this job really well and have the rest of my life, as part of it. And I think, we're so focused sometimes at these companies and we're like, this role, what's next? What can I do next? And to take a step back and think about why, what is it that I want out of my career? What's important to me? Maybe right now, maybe it's in the future. And then just being open about it. I think, Jocelyn, you said something really interesting that I don't know if people caught up on. You said, it's a relief or it's helpful to your manager when you put your name in the hat because they know that you want to do that. And so, being transparent, I talked about the fact that I wanted to have a baby when I joined a startup. I said, hey, I want to have a kid in the next couple of years. I'm the 7th person at this company. I'm the only person who's client facing. Is this going to be a problem or can we work through it? And we talked about it and, it worked out really well. We were able to have an open conversation about it. So just thinking about it in a bit of a different way. And then also
the one caution I'll give on, I agree with that. And I certainly would encourage that. And as a leader with, many people who've been through mat leave on my team, I'm a strong advocate for making sure we're planning their career, both leading into their mat leave and after, and talking about what they want to do when they come back. And so that I'm building towards it while they're gone. But just the one caveat is there are a lot of bad managers out there as well. So, it's possible that that advice would backfire.
Well, more bad than good. More bad than good.
For you. Then that's the wrong place for you. Because somebody who, especially in a growth startup, things will change so dramatically that there is always going to be, to Christy's point, a role that never existed before, something else. And that doesn't just apply to startups. When we got acquired by Oracle, at Eloqua. I had, at that point, I'd kind of been burning out on the CS job because it was intense, and going through an acquisition and getting to the other side is hard. And I ended up, Karen Pisha, who I worked for at the time, who was a great leader I learned a ton from. There was sort of a project about like, if we were going to go, because once you get bought by Oracle, you're on every price list around the world. And it was very distracting for a company that was only 500 when they got acquired. We didn't have people around the world. Here's a project. We want to look at where, if we were doing this intentionally, where would we go first? And that project turned into a job. And I spent, 2 or 3 years kind of traveling around the world trying to get the marketing cloud set up in all those places. So I had a manager who could see that what I was doing was no longer giving me energy. She had a need to fill. That was a project at the time. So it was kind of off the side of my desk, and it eventually turned into a job, right? So it was not an obvious path. It didn't exist. We created a department. We created a whole bunch of stuff. So it's not always going to be something that's predictable, but if you're following your interest, what you want to learn, how you are fulfilled and how you get energy, the right manager and the right transparency and the right place is going to give you tons of opportunities that you couldn't have even thought of. It wouldn't be possible for you to imagine that role existed. So be open to it and be open with what you're wanting to learn and try and do.
I want to add something. I want to share like a little bit of a personal story also, because it's how it's impacted my career trajectory, but also my personal life. Very early on in my software career, I wasn't really intentional about my career trajectory. I let my organization and my leaders kind of almost dictate to me what my next steps would be and the scopes of those roles. And as a result, I spent a lot of my time traveling. I mean, there was one year I did over 200,000 miles in travel that year. I was supporting the Philippines and India. And so I'm up super early. I had a team in Australia. And so I was burning the candle every which way. And I did that for years and years and years and years. And so much so that I actually let my career dictate my family planning. And so Julie, you talked about like being very intentional about like, I'm going to go, I'm going to have a child. Here's kind of what my timeline looks like. I failed to do that and prioritize what was important to me. And so now I'm 40 and my husband and I look back and I'm like, oh yeah, that kid that I wanted, it's not part of my story now. Now I have a stepdaughter who I love so much, and she is my kid, and we don't use the word step, and she fills my love tank. But I skipped a big part of what I really probably personally wanted and would have been ultimately very fulfilling as a human, because I let my career kind of control me as opposed to me controlling my career. Just be very cognizant about that, right? Take control over what your career trajectory looks like and make sure that it is serving you well in all the stages of your life, right? Whether that is family or travel or whatever. Prioritize what's important to you and make sure that you're thinking about it through multiple lenses and not just chasing up, whatever up looks like.
Yeah. Yeah. What's nice, again, back to the kind of, it's a good time to be a woman in tech, is I think we see a lot more companies sharing very publicly and their parental leaves and the benefits around that kind of thing. And so I think asking about those is less of a risk than it maybe used to be. And certainly one of the criteria you can use when you're evaluating a role now, because the war on talent is crazy. For those of you hiring, I think you probably know it's really tough, and the standards are high. And now things like, how do you think about family and parental leave? How do you think about all these things are becoming more important in an evaluation? And to Christy's point, to take control of what's important to you, ask right up front, think about it, and be intentional about it right from the beginning. It used to be that you were afraid to say that. And Julie, I think you were
afraid to say it. I was afraid to open. Jocelyn, I like literally thought that if I got pregnant and had to leave, that any opportunity for future growth
would evaporate. Yeah, and I think that was true.
I was sitting with a bunch of men, right? Like that was my career competition, right? Yeah. A bunch of dudes who were sitting in the same roles who they didn't have to answer that question. They didn't have to make that decision, right? So that is tough.
It is. And to the point of helping everybody up, I mean, that's part of the responsibility, I think, that any women who've made it into leadership positions, I do feel a sense of responsibility for making it, all of those things not be detrimental to a career if somebody doesn't want that. And that I think still really requires a lot of work. It's hard as a smaller business to be without a resource. That gap can be very painful and hard. So you got to recognize that it's hard for the company too, depending on the size of it. But it should be an active conversation. It should be something that we're trying to normalize and trying to make real for people. I think there's probably still a ways to go there. So while Julie's story is the best possible outcome where somebody's very open to that.
Well, it was a great conversation. It was great to be open, except for when the CEO goes, okay, just let me know when you start trying. And I was like, no, you've crossed the line there.
Yeah.
That's a weird conversation to happen.
But
No.
I will say a few things. One, it definitely set my career back a little bit in the time, right? So one thing I did, and it was scary, but I was scary and I was confident, right? So I'm at a small startup and I go, I'm going to take a 6-month mat leave. You're in Canada, so we got a year. I wanted to take 6 months and then start weaving my way back in. I said, this is a startup. You can't afford to not have a head of your CS team for 6 months. And I don't want that pressure on me, right? Yeah. So I hired a full replacement. And I said, hire this person. And in 6 months, I guarantee there'll be a job for me. Like I said this, I'm like, there'll be something, I'll do something. Right. And I came back and it was really hard. That first month, I was like, oh, he's in my role. Like, right. And then I found an opportunity and I ran account management and I sat in the sales team for a bit. And it was so incredible for my career. Like I couldn't even imagine what it would be if I didn't have that opportunity. And so even though it was scary, sort of this saying like, be scared and do it anyways. Right. Yeah. And I would say that would be like my, if I were to say one takeaway, it's like, be scared and do it anyways. Be scared and ask that question, right? If you have a question that you're thinking, I'm always the person who asks the question that everyone's afraid to ask in the room because they don't want to sound stupid. I'm like, oh, I'll be the one, like maybe this is obvious to all of you.
I remember that about
that
you.
Question. What'd you say, Joss?
I remember that about you. It was great. In meetings, it was so helpful.
Right. Everyone's thinking it. So just go out there and do it. And anyways, I love ending meetings a bit early. Jocelyn or Christy, do you have any parting words?
I'll let Jocelyn go first.
Well, somebody asked earlier in the chat, like for somebody starting out in CS, what do you wish you knew back when? And I think probably what I like to remind anybody is that at the end of the day, the customers are paying the bills. They're the only reason that anybody else in the company has a job. So you have an opportunity and a responsibility and really mostly the opportunity to enrich the whole company, sharing what you know, that you actually sit on one of the richest pieces of knowledge, and most answers to complex company problems are in the field. And you are the person that's sitting closest to that knowledge. So use that wisely, but also know that you have that. So, sit on the fact that what you learn every day in the field can enrich every other part of the company in a meaningful way. And so it's your gift and your opportunity to share that with everyone else.
Oh, I love that. It was almost like so well put that maybe you just like leave it there.
Yeah.
Hard to follow. I'll give one little thing. I think any advice that I have for all of you, don't be afraid to take risks. Most of the things that have happened to me intentionally or not intentionally were due to me making cognizant decisions at some point that led me to where I was. And a lot of those were things that I was uncomfortable with, I was unsure of. Take risks, take chances. Don't worry about what everyone around you is going to think or say. It doesn't matter. Right? Do what's best for you and just go out there and just do something that feels uncomfortable and make a change. If it's going to help you or it's going to serve you well, do it.
Yeah. And we got your back. Let us know.
Yes.
Christy, Jocelyn, everyone, thank you so much for joining. Thank you for your honesty, your openness, being vulnerable, and being real. That was what today was all about. No more of this glitter and whatever and sunshine. This is what it's like and it's exciting. So thank you so much, everyone. And I'm sure I speak for all of you. If you have any questions or follow up, feel free to reach out to all of us.
Thank you so much for organizing this, Julie.
Thank you. Thanks.
Bye, guys. Bye, guys.
Bye, everyone.